16-year-old Sarah loved capturing life's moments. Every selfie, a story, every snapshot, a memory frozen in time. But one ordinary afternoon her phone would become a window into a terrifying future. One she couldn't escape. It began subtly. A strange feeling, a prickle of unease that ran down her spine as she smiled for a selfie with her friends. She brushed it off as nerves, the awkwardness of adolescence. But deep down, a seed of dread had been planted. Sarah scrolled through her photos, her finger lingering on the selfie. The image that had seemed so innocent now filled her with unease. She zoomed in on the blurry background, her heart sinking as she recognized the outline. It was the old abandoned warehouse at the edge of town, a place shrouded in local legends and whispered warnings, a place teenagers dared each other to visit but rarely did after dark. The warehouse was notorious. Whispers of strange occurrences, unexplained noises, and even satanic rituals clung to its crumbling walls like cobwebs. No one dared to go there alone, especially not at night. Yet there it was, clear as day, in the background of her selfie. But how? Sarah had never been anywhere near the warehouse, let alone taken a photo with it lurking in the background. Days turned into a blurry torment for Sarah. The selfie, once a source of amusement, was now a haunting premonition. She couldn't escape the chilling image of the warehouse, a constant reminder of the dread that had seeped into her life. Her friends, initially dismissive, began to share her concern. Their laughter faded into worried whispers as they noticed the change in her demeanor. She tried to confide in adults, but her words were met with skepticism and concern for her well-being. "It's just a photo, honey," her mother soothed, her voice laced with worry. "Don't let your imagination run wild." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her selfie was a harbinger of something terrible, a glimpse into a future she desperately wanted to avoid. Late at night, while her family slept, Sarah would delve into the depths of the internet, her fingers frantically typing queries into the cold glow of her laptop screen. Can selfies predict the future? Premonitions in photographs, omens and signs? Each search led her down a rabbit hole of paranormal phenomena, urban legends, and chilling tales that sent shivers down her spine. Two weeks passed. 2 weeks of agonizing dread and sleepless nights. Sarah tried to move on, tried to convince herself the selfie was just a cruel trick of her imagination. She forced a smile, pretended everything was normal. But the fear remained, a constant weight on her chest. Then, it happened again. Another selfie, another chilling glimpse into the future. She was at the mall with her friends, their laughter a strained attempt to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Sarah raised her phone, her finger instinctively hovering over the camera button. She hesitated, a shiver running down her spine. The fear was back, stronger than ever, but she couldn't resist the urge to capture the moment, to see if the camera would once again betray her with a glimpse of the unknown. The photo flashed on the screen and Sarah's blood ran cold. This time, there was no mistaking it. Reflected in the shiny surface of a store window clear as day were flashing red and blue lights. The second selfie spread through the school like wildfire. Whispers followed Sarah down the hallways, a chorus of speculation and fear. Some dismissed it as a prank, a desperate attempt for attention. Others saw it as something more, a chilling reminder that some things defy explanation. Sarah found herself caught in a whirlwind of rumors and superstition. Classmates she barely knew approached her, their eyes wide with a mixture of fascination and fear. They bombarded her with questions about the selfies, about the warehouse, about what she knew, but Sarah had no answers. She was just as terrified as they were, if not more. The school counselor, a kind woman with tired eyes, listened patiently as Sarah poured out her fears. She spoke of the selfies, the premonitions, the overwhelming sense of dread that had enveloped her life, but her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The counselor, bound by logic and reason, offered words of comfort and reassurance, but they rang hollow in Sarah's ears. Desperate for answers, Sarah turned to her family history, searching for any trace of the paranormal, any hint of a hereditary gift or curse that could explain what she was experiencing. Her grandmother, a woman of strong faith and quiet wisdom, had always spoken of intuition, of listening to the whispers of the universe. Could this be what she meant? Time seemed to accelerate, each tick of the clock pushing Sarah closer to an unknown precipice. The selfies had become a countdown, a visual representation of her dwindling time. She became obsessed with mirrors, terrified of what they might reveal. Every glance at her reflection sent shivers down her spine, wondering if this would be the time she saw a glimpse of the inevitable. Fueled by a mix of fear and a desperate need for control, Sarah threw herself into unraveling the mystery behind the selfies. She spent hours poring over local news archives, searching for any mention of accidents, fires, or any incidents involving ambulances near the abandoned warehouse. She scoured online forums dedicated to the paranormal, seeking advice from self-proclaimed experts and those who claimed to have experienced similar phenomena. Days turned into a blur of frantic research, sleepless nights, and growing anxiety. The weight of the impending doom pressed down on her, threatening to crush her spirit. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, a flicker of hope emerged. A cryptic message on a paranormal forum, a symbol scrawled on a bathroom stall, a whispered warning from an unexpected source. All hinted at a way to break the curse, to change her fate. Sarah and her friends stood before the dilapidated warehouse, a flashlight in hand. The air inside was thick with decay. As they ventured deeper, shadows danced across the walls. Suddenly, a chilling realization. They were not alone. Footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate. Sarah and her friends stood paralyzed, their breath caught in their throats. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer, echoing off the warehouse walls. They exchanged terrified glances, their eyes wide with fear. The air crackled with tension, the silence amplifying every creak and groan of the aging building. Sarah's phone slipped from her grasp, clattering to the concrete floor. The screen, illuminated by the eerie selfie, cast grotesque shadows that danced across the dusty machinery. The sound of their pursuer seemed to reverberate through the very foundation of the warehouse, each step a hammer blow against their dwindling hope. Instinct took over. They scrambled backward, their backs pressed against the cold, damp wall. The rough brick bit into Sarah's skin, a stark contrast to the icy fear that coursed through her veins. Their combined breaths, shallow and ragged, filled the oppressive silence as they sought refuge in the shadows, their bodies trembling with a mixture of adrenaline and primal terror. The footsteps stopped, a long, drawn-out silence stretched between them and the unseen intruder. Then a shadow detached itself from the darkness, slowly taking the form of a figure. Tall, imposing, its features obscured by the play of light and shadow. A collective gasp escaped their lips, their eyes fixated on the approaching silhouette, their minds racing to comprehend the situation, their bodies frozen in a state of heightened awareness, poised for flight or fight. A blinding light pierced the darkness, momentarily blinding them. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, raising a hand to shield her face from the unexpected glare. When she dared to open her eyes again, she found herself staring into the beam of a powerful flashlight. Her friend, equally terrified, stood frozen beside her, their faces starkly illuminated in the harsh light. "What are you two doing here?" a gruff voice boomed through the cavernous space. The flashlight lowered slightly, revealing the face of their pursuer. It was an older man, his weathered face etched with lines that spoke of a life lived outdoors. His eyes, though narrowed in suspicion, held a flicker of something else. Concern? Curiosity? We saw the photo," Sarah stammered, her voice trembling as she struggled to regain her composure. She held up her phone, the screen displaying the eerie selfie. "The ambulance. The warehouse. We thought—" Her words trailed off, the absurdity of the situation hitting her with full force. How could she possibly explain her premonition, her desperate attempt to cheat fate, to this stranger? The man squinted at the phone, taking a step closer to examine it. He grunted, a low rumble in his chest, before turning his gaze back to Sarah. "This place is dangerous, especially after dark," he said, his voice softer now, laced with a hint of warning. "You shouldn't be here." He paused, his eyes scanning their faces as if assessing the situation. "Come on," he finally said, motioning towards the entrance. "I'll walk you out." Despite their fear, Sarah and her friend trusted the gruff stranger. He seemed to hold a piece of the puzzle. A sudden crash shattered the uneasy truce. "Go!" he barked, shoving them towards a side door. "Run! Don't look back!" Their survival instincts kicked in. The warehouse held the key to Sarah's fate. The cool night air hit them like a slap, a welcome contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the warehouse. They didn't stop running, their legs propelled by adrenaline and raw fear. The sounds of the city-distant traffic, a barking dog, the faint strains of music filtered through the darkness, a reassuring symphony of normalcy after the terrifying silence of the warehouse. They finally collapsed beneath a streetlight, their bodies trembling, their lungs burning. Sarah doubled over, clutching her side, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her friend, equally breathless, leaned against her, their shoulders touching, sharing the weight of their shared terror and the unspoken questions that swirled in their minds. As Sarah's breathing slowed and her heart rate gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, her hand instinctively reached for her phone. She needed to call someone, to tell someone what had happened, to seek refuge in the familiarity of her life outside the nightmare that had unfolded within the walls of the abandoned warehouse. But as her fingers fumbled over the keys, her gaze fell upon the screen. The selfie, the ambulance, the warehouse. And then, she saw them. Reflected in the darkness of the screen, growing closer with each passing second, were the unmistakable flashing lights of an ambulance, their red and blue strobes slicing through the darkness, cutting through the fragile illusion of safety that had enveloped them in the moments after their escape. The premonition, it seemed, had a way of catching up. The ambulance screeched to a halt, its arrival as sudden as the crash. Paramedics rushed out, faces etched with urgency. Sarah and her friend stood trembling, watching in stunned silence. Paramedics focused on a motionless figure on the sidewalk. The older man, his chest rising in shallow breaths. Ambulance lights painted the scene in stark relief. A wave of nausea washed over Sarah. The selfies, the warehouse, the ambulance. It was all happening, just as she had seen it. And as the sirens wailed, Sarah wondered if she was witnessing a tragedy already written. The ambulance sped through the desolate city streets, its siren a piercing wail that sliced through the silence of the night. Sarah and her friend watched as it disappeared into the distance, its flashing lights fading into the maze of buildings. Sarah's breaths came in short, shallow gasps, her body trembling from the adrenaline. The weight of the premonition pressed down on her. "We need to go to the hospital," Sarah said. Her friend nodded in agreement. They had to find out what happened to the older man. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room seemed to amplify the sterile silence, broken only by the occasional coughs and murmurs of other anxious visitors. Sarah and her friend sat huddled together, their faces pale and drawn in the unforgiving light. The air was thick with a mixture of antiseptic and the unspoken fear that permeated the very walls of the building, a place where hope and despair walked hand in hand. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah, unable to bear the agonizing weight any longer, approached the reception desk. The nurse, her features etched with the fatigue of a double shift, offered a weary smile. "Can I help you, dear?" she asked, her voice gentle despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes. "We're looking for someone," Sarah began, her voice catching in her throat. She swallowed hard, trying to maintain her composure. "An older man, brought in by ambulance about an hour ago. He was injured near the old warehouse on Elm Street." The words tumbled out, a jumbled mix of fear and urgency. The nurse's smile faded, replaced by a look of professional concern. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes scanning the screen. After what felt like an agonizing eternity, she looked up, her gaze meeting Sarah's with a mixture of pity and something akin to sympathy. "I'm sorry, dear," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper, "but there's no record of anyone matching that description being admitted tonight." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine despite the warmth of the hospital. The nurse's words echoed in her ears, each syllable a hammer blow against the fragile wall of hope. "That's impossible," she whispered. "We saw the ambulance. We saw them take him." Sarah pulled out her phone, the screen illuminating her face. "Look," she pleaded, "this is him." The nurse, her skepticism evident, reluctantly took the phone. She squinted at the screen, her brow furrowing. Just when Sarah was about to give in to despair, the nurse's demeanor shifted. There are stories, she began. Rumors, really, about an old ambulance driver, a man who operates outside the system. He's said to have connections to a clinic, a place where people go when they don't want to be found. I don't know if it's true, but if that man you saw was injured and he wanted to disappear, that's where I'd start looking. The rain, a cold, relentless drizzle, mirrored Sarah's mood as they stepped out of the hospital and back into the desolate embrace of the city night. The nurse's words, though cryptic and shrouded in an air of urban legend, offered a glimmer of hope, a thread to follow in the labyrinthine puzzle they found themselves trapped within. Clutching the scrap of paper with the address the nurse had scribbled down, a place called Hope Clinic, located on the outskirts of town. In a neighborhood even the taxi driver seemed hesitant to enter, Sarah felt a surge of determination course through her. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was all they had. The clinic, when they finally found it, was as nondescript and forgettable as the rain-soaked street it occupied. The sign above the entrance, barely illuminated by a flickering neon light, read simply, OP, the missing H adding to the air of decay and neglect that clung to the building like a shroud. A sense of foreboding washed over them as they crossed the threshold, the heavy door closing behind them with a thud that seemed to reverberate through the empty hallway. The air inside was thick with the smell of disinfectant and something else, something indefinable yet unsettling. Despite the lateness of the hour, the clinic was eerily silent, devoid of the usual sounds of life and activity one would expect from a place of healing. It felt more like a tomb than a sanctuary. Sarah and her friend walked through the dimly lit hallway, their footsteps echoing. The clinic felt abandoned, yet an unsettling energy lingered. Sarah's hand trembled as she raised it to knock. The door swung open, revealing a shadowy figure. Sarah gasped, her phone's eerie glow illuminating the figure's face. The selfie that haunted her mirrored the scene before her. She was now a participant trapped in a macabre performance. The older Sarah stared back from the phone screen, her features etched with a weariness that seemed to transcend her years. But it was her eyes that held Sarah captive. Eyes that were once bright and full of life, now clouded with a chilling sadness. The phone slipped from Sarah's grasp, clattering to the floor. How is this possible?" she whispered, her voice hoarse with terror. The older Sarah offered a sad smile, a knowing tilt of her head. "It's a gift," she said, her voice a low, melodic murmur. "And a curse." "But why?" Sarah choked out, her gaze darting between the older version of herself and the shadowy figure on the gurney. As if on cue, the older Sarah gestured towards the room, the shadows parting to reveal the chilling truth. It was a makeshift operating room, sterile and cold, with medical equipment gleaming under a single harsh light. And on the gurney, pale and still, lay Sarah's friend, her chest rising and falling with the shallow rhythm of sedation. "What are you doing to her?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible above the frantic beating of her own heart. The older Sarah's eyes, filled with a chilling detachment, met hers. "Saving her," she said simply, her voice devoid of emotion. "Just as I've been saving others. Just as I've been trying to save you." The older Sarah took a step closer, her hand outstretched as if to bridge the chasm of time and experience that separated them. "It's time you understood," she said, her voice laced with an urgency that belied the calmness of her demeanor. "Time you saw the truth." Sarah wanted to run, to scream, to disappear into the shadows and pretend this was all a horrible nightmare. But something held her rooted to the spot. A desperate need for answers, a morbid curiosity that whispered of a darkness she couldn't comprehend, yet couldn't turn away from. "The truth about what?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice trembling as she took a hesitant step back, her eyes darting between the older version of herself and the unconscious form of her friend. "About who you are," the older Sarah replied, guiding the younger towards a computer screen that flickered to life, revealing a cascade of images, news articles, accident reports, police records, all connected to the selfies, all documenting events that mirrored the premonitions, yet with a chilling twist. Each event, each tragedy averted, each life saved, all thanks to the older Sarah's intervention. "I've seen the future," the older Sarah said, her voice a low murmur that seemed to echo in the silence of the room. But I can also change it. I have to. It's the only way to atone for the mistakes I've made, the lives I couldn't save. Her gaze met Sarah's, a flicker of pain crossing her features, including yours. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but the picture they formed was more terrifying than anything Sarah could have imagined. "Is that why you brought her here?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "To save her from the accident? The one in the selfie?" The older Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "The premonitions, they're not random. They're connected to you, to your life, to the people you care about." She reached out, her touch surprisingly gentle as she brushed a stray strand of hair from Sarah's face. "But the price of knowledge, the burden of choice, it's heavy, Sarah. Heavier than you can imagine." The older Sarah's face hardened, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of battles fought and scars earned. "The visions, the choices I have to make, they take a toll, a heavy one." For the first time, Sarah saw the toll that her gift, this curse, had taken on her older self. The weight of countless lives saved, of futures rewritten, etched into the lines on her face, the haunted look in her eyes. But instead of breaking her, it seemed to have forged a strength, a steely resolve that Sarah couldn't help but admire. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice trembling but resolute. The older Sarah's lips curved into a sad smile, a flicker of hope breaking through the sadness in her eyes. "You need to choose," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the steady beep of the heart monitor. "Light or shadow, savior or victim, the path is yours to forge." Sarah stared at her phone, lying on the cold linoleum floor. The screen flickered, the selfie a haunting reminder of the crossroads she now faced. Her older self, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and resignation, seemed to plead with her from the digital abyss. Choose. The weight of the word pressed down on her, heavier than any burden she had ever known. Her gaze shifted to her friend, lying so vulnerable on the gurney. The steady beep of the heart monitor was a stark reminder of the fragility of life, of the ever-present threat that her older self fought tirelessly against. Could she turn her back on that fight? Could she condemn her friend, and countless others, to a fate she might be able to prevent? The older Sarah watched her, her expression unreadable. She made no move to interfere, to coerce or persuade. The choice, she had made it clear, was Sarah's alone. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the hum of the medical equipment and the frantic beating of Sarah's own heart. It was a silence that stretched into eternity, a space where fear and courage battled for dominance. Then, slowly, Sarah reached for her phone, her fingers closing around the cold metal. But instead of calling for help, instead of running from the truth, she raised it to her face, her eyes locking with those of her older self. And with a voice that trembled with a newfound determination, she whispered, "Teach me, teach." Years passed, years filled with sacrifice and lives saved. The selfies became a roadmap, guiding Sarah's steps. She embraced her gift, bearing its weight with grace. The clinic transformed into a sanctuary. The air now hummed with hope and healing. Sarah paused at the doorway, recognizing a familiar face, a silent promise to fight against the darkness. The battle against fate was never truly over, and she would be ready,